Hi angels, it's Hailey Reese, and today's video is another video that has been requested by you guys. And whenever you guys request things, I of course want to come on here and give that to you guys. A lot of you guys have been requesting that I read this spooky story about not going into the forest, and it is supposedly a true story written by a girl who's experiencing what this story entails. So I kind of briefly skimmed it. I looked it over to see if it was of interest, and it had me so crazily intrigued that it's taken everything in me not to pre-read this story. So today I'm gonna come on here, we're gonna read this scary story. It's supposedly paranormal. It has a lot to do with a demon or a demon-like entity, and it's supposedly real and really, really freaky. So I guess we're gonna read this together. Make sure along the way you drop some comments down below letting me know what you guys think of this, and let's see if it scares us or what we think about it or any of those things. A few months ago, one of my closest friends at work and I realized our feelings were growing into something more than just a friendship. In our company, it's frowned upon to date co-workers. Technically not against the rules, but frowned upon. When we decided to take our relationship to the next level, we decided it would be best for both of us to keep it private, at least for a while. He lived in the country, over 40 minutes away from work and where I lived. It was perfect. He was so far out in the middle of nowhere, we could stay out there and go into the little town nearby without the worry of being caught by chatty coworkers. The only real problem was that we both work late night shifts. I almost always work at midnight and he normally works at 4 a.m. That led us to a lot of commuting in the pitch black that can only be seen on country roads. I always enjoyed the drive. I'm a lover of the dark, a true night owl to my core. I loved the drives when we were together and when I drove on my own. Some days I'd work half a shift and then drive out to his house on his days off and crawl into bed with him. Those were always my favorite days. He lived with some of his family in a large home on an enormous parcel of land. It sprawled for acres up a large hill with a pasture and further up thickly wooded forest. I always felt safe there. There were guns strategically placed around the house and enough space between any other house that you could do just about whatever you wanted without anyone calling the cops or knocking on your front door to tell you to keep it down. I always loved that, the privacy of it all. I joked on several occasions that the only downfall would be if you needed medical or any other emergency services, it would take them forever to get out there. And once they did, they might not even be able to find the place. The first time we made love was a few weeks after we started seeing each other. It was on a dark, cool night when there was a meteor shower. We carried a giant pile of blankets out to the top of the pasture, just before the woods, and laid down. We made a little bed there and curled up under the blankets to watch the show. After an hour or so of talking and holding hands, things escalated. Just as things were starting to get heated, I had the oddest feeling of being watched. It felt like something in the distance just out of my view was watching. My entire body shuddered. I tried to shake the feeling, convince myself it was nothing more than the cold making me shudder and perhaps an animal in the barn or maybe just an owl having a look to see where the noise was coming from. I let myself believe that so it wouldn't ruin my night. That night and many nights to follow, I was plagued with horrible nightmares, ones I couldn't explain or understand. It felt like being watched in a way I couldn't explain. I almost felt like if I could just stay asleep for just one more minute, I could see what it was that was so interested in me. I often woke up in a pool of sweat, tears streaming down my face. The relationship was still new, and I didn't want him to think I was crazy, so I kept it to myself. At some point, I realized it only ever happened out there. I slept dreamlessly in my own bed. I began to sleep over less and less over the next couple of months as the dreams only became more vivid. That is, until I realized I was afraid to sleep alone. The dreams began to haunt my waking life as well. One night, I fell asleep before him. He was watching TV and having a couple beers when he said he heard me. I'd been whimpering in my sleep, and when he walked over to check on me, he could see the tears rolling down my cheeks. He shook me and shook me, saying my name louder after each effort. When I awoke, it was all of a sudden and with a scream. I'm not sure who it scared more. He told me the moment I opened my eyes, and they locked onto his, I looked possessed or haunted, that I looked like my soul was not in my body. He was visibly shaken by the experience. At this point, I felt obligated to explain to him how it had been going on for months, that I couldn't sleep, that the feeling was everywhere. The dreams weren't all of it though. As I was driving, especially to his house, I began to feel watched, like something just out of the scope of my headlights was waiting for me, lurking just beyond the veil. One night when the moon was full, I could have sworn I saw something out there amongst the trees. My life had been turned upside down. The lack of sleep has been affecting me in ways I didn't even realize it could. I have no appetite. I've stopped caring about my appearance. I sometimes go days without changing from my boyfriend's oversized hoodie. My work has begun to slip. I'm afraid something bad is going to happen any day. I am a ghost of the person I once was because of a feeling. No more than a feeling. Something is there. My loving boyfriend has been incredible through all of this. He might think I'm losing my mind, but he's known me long enough to know I wouldn't just make something like this up. He's been doing everything he can to help. His initial suggestion was to get blackout drunk. One that with all of the stress in my life I was happy to try. Still the dreams. It was only worse at night. I had even more trouble pulling myself out of the dream that night. It felt like whatever was watching me was able to get even closer. So close I could smell it. The thick, musty smell of decay and death loomed heavy as I awoke. I was barely able to lean over the bed before puking violently all over the hardwood floor in my slippers. I have also tried sleeping pills, meditation, herbal supplements, and exercise. Nothing has worked. I'm afraid to sleep alone because if I can't wake myself up, someone has to be there to make sure it doesn't get me. He tried to convince me to see a psychiatrist, but I refused. That's when he made the suggestion of trying a forum online for people who couldn't sleep. Seek help from the same place any good millennial would, the internet. I looked and looked, browsing forum after forum, begging for advice from anybody who had the slightest idea of what I was experiencing. Most everyone I talked with seems to think one of two things: sleep paralysis or a mental breakdown they attributed to an early onset of a mental disorder. That is, until very late one night I sat in my truck waiting for it to heat up. I scrolled through yet another forum and saw a picture. The worst thing and picture I have ever seen in my entire life. The face was like a deer's skull, but sharper, angrier looking. It had a humanoid shape, except everything about it was longer. It must have been 7 or 8 feet tall, but its limbs were all much too long. The arms stretched down past the midpoint of the body, and the long, horrible hands stretching out beyond that. It was all black, making it impossible to tell what horrors were beneath the darkness. The worst part was the eyes. Truly soulless eyes. There was no pigment, no pupil, only blank white orbs staring out from the skull. But somehow, even still, they were watching me, and I knew that was a thing that had been there all these months. The longer I looked, the thicker the smell became. It was so strong I could taste it. It filled my nose, my mouth, choking me. My head was spinning as I gasped for air. Just before I passed out, I saw the caption under the photo. They're watching you. They're waiting for you. About 20 minutes later, I awoke to a loud thumping on my window. I'd passed out and a coworker saw me sleeping in my truck and was going to scare me. Turns out they were the one who ended up being scared. There was puke down the front of my shirt and dried blood under my nose. Evidently, I looked dead. I explained that it was a migraine and swiftly drove off. On the way to my boyfriend's, my phone died, making the drive seem even lonelier and more frightening. Silence gives your brain too much space to think. There's no radio signal out that far, so I drove in silence. I was horrified at what I'd seen, but under that was a layer of relief. I wasn't crazy. As I drove, I also knew I wasn't alone. When I made it to his place, I ran upstairs to his room and plugged my phone in, then violently shook him awake, exclaiming that I might have somewhere to start digging. He got one look at me and immediately sent me to the shower and brought his favorite pajama pants and a big t-shirt down to the bathroom. He leaned against the sink opposite of the shower while I got cleaned up and talked soothingly to me, almost like you would talk to a fussy child. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I was going to find out what was going on. I had an idea now, somewhere to begin. I went to show the image I'd found of my boyfriend, but I couldn't find it again. It was nowhere. The forum I had been in didn't even seem to exist. I was hysterical. I knew what I'd seen. I have searched endless hours trying to find it again, but it's gone forever, lost in the web. I can't even find a mention of something similar. I tried to explain what I had seen, but there isn't a way to describe the way it made me feel or that awful smell drowning me. To a logical person, none of this makes sense. My boyfriend was no exception, but his love for me let him break away from that and at least explore the possibility that I was being watched by this demon, this monster, this thing. Last night there was a full moon, not just any full moon. It was rare and beautiful, the giant moon lighting up the sky above me. The air was crisp and cool as I started my truck. I began to drive to my boyfriend's house just after 4 a.m. with the moon high above me. The extra light was nice on the winding back country roads. Then I began to feel it again, the dark, terrifying feeling I've been getting for months. It gets worse and worse every time. I can only imagine it's because it's getting closer to me, to whatever it is that it wants. I felt the dark horror flood over me and I began to slow my truck down to a crawl, just beyond any corner, hiding just behind the trees. It could be there. I thought I saw something that moved around a slight turn in the road and slammed on my brakes. I came to a screeching stop in the middle of the road. I could feel my heart slamming against my rib cage. There was a loud noise and lights behind me, and then in front of me a huge white semi-truck swerved around me going at least 70 miles an hour. I looked back into the woods where I'd seen the monster, but it was just blackness. I flicked on my hazards and sat catching my breath for a moment. It seemed as though I had narrowly avoided death twice in the span of 2 minutes. That's when I heard it. The most horrible noise I had ever heard. It was all metal, scraping, smashed glass, and what I can only describe as crunching. Hearing it hurt my head. It was as if there was so much going on in my brain it couldn't process it all at once. Gathering what I had left of my courage, I decided to see if I could figure out what happened. I drove slowly up around the corner and saw nothing, then another and another, and that's when I saw it. Less than a mile from where I'd stopped. My truck in the road was a semi. It had rolled completely blocking the road. It looked like it had rolled several times before eventually landing upside down across the road. There was glass and blood everywhere. Far too much blood to lose and still be alive. I parked my truck and slowly approached the mangled cab of the semi. I could smell it again. The awful smell of rotting corpse. But then I saw all of the deer. There was at least 3 or pieces of the deer. I was the first to the scene of the most brutal car accident I'd ever seen. I did what I could to help. I called 911, checked on the driver, but there was nothing I could do to make sure the semi wasn't going to burst into flames. As I stood there waiting for the emergency services to show up again, the monster, the demon, whatever you want to call it, it was there, watching me just like always. I could smell it getting closer and closer to me. I stared out at it, making contact with its deep, soulless eyes. In that moment, I felt almost comfortable with it. Ooh, I don't like that. Almost pulled towards it. It began to slowly move towards me, not walking, not run, just move. It was drawing me towards it, and I obligated. I was so tired and so done with being scared that I just did what it wanted. I walked slowly towards it, the terror in my chest subsiding. I turned away for a second as I heard the ambulance approaching, and it was gone. The monster had left just like that. I haven't slept. The dreams are worse than ever. Its face haunts me day in and out, tormenting me, beckoning me into the woods. I know what it wants now. It wants me. I don't know why or for what purpose. Does it want to kill me, or did it save my life? I need answers. So in my last attempt at finding help, I reach out to you. Do you know what this thing is? What does it want with me? Can I get rid of it? Please help. Please, God, help me. I don't want to go into the woods, but I don't know if I can resist it much longer. I don't want to go into the woods. I don't want to go into the woods. I don't want to go. And that's the end of the story. First of all, that is absolutely terrifying. A lot of those things are like symptoms and signs of possession taking place. Like the bleeding of the nose, the vomiting, the passing out, looking dazed and like you're not really there, seeing this consistent demon. Now, what throws me off about this story is the fact that it appeared to have saved her from being a part of that big crash. I don't know what to make of this story, you guys. It's creepy, it's eerie, it's not that far-fetched. I believe things like this happen, and I don't know. I have to sit on this one and really just think about it, but regardless, it did scare me, and it did get me wondering what's happened to this girl, what's gonna happen, and what was that thing? What do you guys think of this story? Do you think that it's true? Do you think that it's a real thing that's happening? What do you think it could be if it is true? If it's not true in your mind, did it at least scare you? Please, please, please let me know in the comments below what you guys think of this, because I don't know, that story really freaks me out and I don't know what to make of it. If you guys are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. And if you did enjoy today's video, I would love it if you would give it a big thumbs up, because that makes me really happy and I really appreciate it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until next time, I love you.